Look, if you've spent 3 hours getting beaten to a pulp by the same boss in Elden Ring and thought, man, I need more of this. First, I totally get you. Second, you're in the right place. Because From Software basically opened a box that cannot be closed. They proved that players don't want everything to be easy. They want to earn every step they take forward. And since then, a massive wave of developers has been trying to capture that same feeling, each in their own way. Some of these games lean heavily into exploration. Others focus on lore and world building. And then there are those that just want to make your life difficult in the most satisfying way possible. And look, some of them even surprised me. So today, we're going through 10 new games that if Elden Ring is your style, you need to have on your radar. I'm Matthew, and let's get to it.
This foul passenger, he's the poison in your mother's heart.
If you felt that Elden Ring was a watershed moment, then Lords of the Fallen 2 is the next game that will make you feel that same mixture of adrenaline, curiosity, and dread in every corner. It arrives poised to be one of the most brutal Souls-likes of 2026, built on Unreal Engine 5, with a dark, heavier tone and an atmosphere that seems intent on keeping you permanently on the defensive. The biggest change for me is how it takes the dual-world concept from the first game and transforms it into something even more harmful. You won't just be switching between the world of the living and the Umbral, but you'll also feel that every decision to shift dimensions could save you or lead you into a trap. This makes exploration tenser, smarter, and much less just run and hit, which I love in games of this type. Combat appears to be where the game really wants to shine, more fluid, more aggressive, and with finishers that show the brutality of the confrontation. You will feel every strike, every block, and every timing error as if it were a lesson that the game is not there to forgive you. Bosses, grotesque creatures, and intense battles already appear in the trailers, with a presence that screams a true Souls-like. The sequel is also scheduled for release in 2026 on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series, and it brings co-op and multiplayer, which significantly changes the experience for those who like to face these challenges with friends. Regarding PC requirements, we can already see that the game will demand powerful hardware, but this also indicates that it aims to deliver something visually impressive, not just mechanically solid. If you love Elden Ring for its exploration, constant danger, the feeling of hard-won control, and a world that feels alive and dangerous, Lords of the Fallen 2 is the game you need to know. It could be the sequel that finally takes what the first game started and turns it into something truly worthy of entering the same conversation as the giants of the genre. The Relic, First Guardian arrives on July 31st, 2026, for PC and PS5, and later for Xbox Series and Nintendo Switch 2. Developed by the Korean studio Project Cloud Games, it is already being called one of the most promising in the genre for bringing its own ideas that could truly evolve Souls-likes. The game is an action RPG heavily inspired by Asian fantasy, where you are the last guardian, and your mission is to find the pieces of a great broken relic, close the void of darkness that has consumed a world, and save Arsiltis, which was once prosperous and is now an apocalyptic landscape of ruins and death. It's not just run and hit. You will use the powers of the relics to solve puzzles, uncover secrets, and overcome obstacles, which adds a very interesting layer of exploration and creativity for those who like to feel immersed in the world. Combat is described as stylish, with bosses that aren't just enemies, but characters with backstories of sadness and tragedy. Each defeated boss gives you special items and their personal diary, allowing you to piece together the fragmented narrative of the game, an approach that mixes The Witcher and Dark Souls according to Gaming Bible. There are over 70 bosses, each carrying a personal history, and this transforms every victory into more than a simple achievement of difficulty. The world is semi-open, allowing you to freely explore the collapsed landscape of the relic, follow a rich story, and hear from NPCs, each of whom carries echoes of promises, hopes, fear, and love. You will collect fragments of the relics, which are the memories and desires of those who lived before, and from them, assemble your own interpretation of the story, which gives much greater emotional weight to every decision and every area explored. For those who like Elden Ring for the weight of exploration, the feeling that every corner can be dangerous, and enemies that have a soul and a history, The Relic, First Guardian, is one of the 2026 games that deserves to be on your list. It has everything to be the Souls-like that doesn't just copy what already exists, but adds something new to the genre. Bosses with personal narratives, puzzles with relics, and a world inspired by Asian folklore that makes you feel different from any other Western fantasy. Mistfall Hunter mixes the heavy feel of a Souls-like with the adrenaline of a PvPv extraction format. It is already considered one of the most promising titles for those who love to suffer and smile in dark worlds. The game's universe is fascinating. It takes place on a continent in ruins after Ragnarok, where the war between supreme gods and outsiders left behind a corrosive fog called Gildan Mist. You take on the role of a Gildan hunter, exploring these cursed lands full of grotesque monsters, either alone or with two other friends in co-op. The dark Nordic fantasy mood ensures that every shadow is a threat, and every setting is a melancholic spectacle. Combat is the heart of the game, and has everything we like: weight, tactics, and deep builds. You can choose between classes, like mages or archers, combining skills, talents, and different equipment to create your ideal style. It is necessary to study the enemies, have patience, and know the right time to dodge or attack. But the real tension comes from the extraction element. Everything you find can be lost if you don't escape in time. The extraction part is what changes everything. You enter the mist, fill your backpack with valuable loot by killing monsters, and try to find a safe point to flee. But there's a giant problem. Besides the creatures, there are other real players on the map hunting the same thing you are. The fear of losing everything to someone hidden behind a tree adds a layer of psychological terror that will test your emotions in an interesting way. If you loved Elden Ring and feel that the first Mortal Shell was one of the most unique and frantic Souls-likes of recent years, then Mortal Shell 2 is the game you need to know about. It arrives with full force in 2026 for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series, and is already being called a Souls-like that will raise the level of the genre with combat that is faster, more aggressive, and more visceral than the first. The premise remains the same. In a ruined world full of the corpses of exceptional warriors, you can possess these vessels to awaken their inner strengths, special abilities, and character traits. But now you can switch shells instantly, without having to stop, which makes combat much more dynamic and allows you to adapt your strategy in the middle of a duel, something the first game hardly allowed to be done with such fluidity. Combat is one of the strongest points. It is agile, expressive, and full of risk versus reward, especially in the parry system, which requires brutal precision and timing, but gives an incredible sense of power when you succeed. The duration is also much longer. While the first had about 10 to 12 hours, Mortal Shell 2 is expected to last between 25 and 30 hours for the main story, not counting side quests and optional dungeons. The world is open, but compact and well-connected, with over 60 dungeons that test your skills and weapons, plus mini-bosses and hidden challenges. Additionally, the game has a huge variety of biomes: snow, swamps, castles, dense dungeons, and even unexpected armaments like shotguns and machine guns, giving a unique mix of dark fantasy with touches of dystopian technology. The open beta is already available on Steam, with over 250,000 downloads in just a few days, and players who have tested it say the game is much better than the first, with important improvements in combat, progression, and art direction. For those who enjoy Elden Ring for the exploration, the heavy combat, and worlds that punish you but also reward skill, Mortal Shell 2 is one of the most promising titles you will find in 2026. Outward 2 arrives in early access on July 7th, 2026 for PC, Steam, Epic, and GOG, and aims to deliver an open-world RPG that is much more alive, brutal, and deep than the first. The great soul of the game remains. You are an ordinary adventurer without innate supernatural powers, trying to survive in a cruel and unforgiving world called Ori. If you die, it's not game over. The story continues, but you might be robbed, saved by a stranger, wake up in a prison, or live with the consequences of your choices, which adds real risk to every decision in combat. The world now has a full 1-year seasonal cycle, with seasons that drastically change the biomes. In winter, rivers freeze and open new paths. In summer, heat and other challenges appear, and each region reacts differently. Divided into 3 initial scenarios and with 11 different origins for the character, the game offers distinct starting points, resources, and even small initial advantages, which helps create truly unique builds and experiences. Combat is much more fluid and responsive, with new gestures for melee weapons, time-consuming rituals for magic. You don't just snap your fingers and cast a spell, you need to prepare. And the long-awaited dual wielding. You can use 2 types of weapons at the same time, with their own movesets, and switch from one to the other seamlessly, canceling attacks by blocking or dodging. Inventory management is also smarter, with a transport mule and new storage methods, but the backpack is still an obstacle. To dodge quickly, you need to drop it, leaving you vulnerable to being robbed. Outward 2 also brings online and split-screen co-op mode, allowing you and a friend to share the same adventure in the brutal world of Ori. For those who enjoy Elden Ring for not being a predefined hero, for worlds that change over time, and for combat that requires preparation and strategy, Outward 2 is one of the most interesting survival and adventure RPGs of the year, with deeper progression, greater customization, and a more sophisticated art direction than the original. In Phantom Blade Zero, you are Soul, an elite assassin cursed with a short life. You only have 66 days to live and must hunt down whoever placed the curse on you, uncover conspiracies that threaten the world, and die for your values. The game has a mature narrative inspired by Resident Evil, and will ask you if you are what you believe or if you are just following orders, something that will leave you thinking long after the final credits. Combat is frantic, visual, and hack-and-slash style with direct inspiration from Devil May Cry, though simplified, and includes Souls-like elements from Elden Ring. The most interesting system is that, upon defeating bosses, you automatically unlock the boss's weapon and can use it, without having to pay anything, without having to buy it, just your skill. This gives a much more personal and rewarding sense of progression, especially for those who love skill tests like in Elden Ring. The world is semi-open, divided into giant sprawling maps, each with unique activities, bosses, puzzles, and secrets, and has over 8 different endings, more than Elden Ring, depending on how you play and which side quests you complete. The game isn't confusing. NPCs, notes, and clues in the world give you clear signs of what impacts your story, and it's a game designed for explorers and completionists. The game has fast action, a dark narrative, wuxia-inspired design, and a combat system that mixes Devil May Cry with Souls-like elements in the best style for those who want something new, but don't abandon what they love. Valor Mortis arrives on October 13th, 2026 for PC, Steam, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series. Developed by One More Level, the creators of Ghost Runner, it is a first-person Souls-like with a brutal and unique premise. You fight, die, are reborn, and get stronger. But every death also costs you part of your humanity. Here you are, William, a soldier in Napoleon's Grande Armée, killed on the battlefield and reborn with a corrupting substance called neptoglobin that pulses in your veins and grants you supernatural powers. The Europe you find is not the old one, A supernatural plague is spreading, former comrades are transformed into grotesque, living monsters, and you must unravel a conspiracy that involves Napoleon, your resurrection, and the fate of all humanity. Combat is pure first-person Souls-like. Stamina bar, skills, and heavy parries, and every death leaves you at the previous checkpoint with the resources to evolve dropped on the body of the enemy that killed you. You have a system of defenses, dashes, brutal executions, and a variety of weapons, but you can also use supernatural powers that give you strength but cost you part of your humanity, which creates that classic risk versus reward tension that every respectable Souls-like has. The world is an alternative 19th century Eastern Europe with distorted Napoleonic wars, but with an atmosphere of supernatural horror, grotesque creatures, and dangerous zones that require precision and strategy. The first-person perspective changes everything. You feel every blow, every gigantic enemy, every massive boss about to crush you, and this adds a tension that only a well-made first-person game can deliver. Valor Mortis is a first-person Souls-like with a distorted Napoleonic setting, corrupting supernatural powers, brutal combat, and a story that mixes revolution, war, and horror. And it may be exactly what you need to feel that thrill again.
If destiny was there, within reach, could you sacrifice everything? For your country. For your empire. For your emperor.
If you've spent the last few weeks feeling that void after beating Elden Ring and were looking for something that would challenge you the same way, you need to set your sights on Stellar Blade: Blood Rain. Shift Up just announced this direct sequel, and look, ever since I saw the first trailer at Summer Game Fest, I felt that familiar thrill that only hardcore action games can provoke. Earth has been abandoned, humanity has fled to space colonies, and what remains is a post-apocalyptic urban setting where the new protagonist, Evie, needs to survive with her own hands. What really grabbed me was how the combat has evolved. If in the first game Eve used swords and firearms, now Evie is purely a melee fighter, using combat gloves and gauntlets. Shift Up has made it clear that they want to deepen the parry, dodge, and combo system even further, with a brutal emphasis on just parry and melee combat that strongly recalls the weight of Sekiro, but with the fluidity and style we've come to expect from the series. If you enjoyed that loop of learning enemy patterns, dying, taking a deep breath, and trying again, Blood Rain seems to have been made for that type of player. The atmosphere of this game is another point that made me extremely excited. The futuristic city covered in rain, the sense of ruin and abandonment, all this strongly recalls a certain melancholy that Elden Ring mastered so well. It's not an open world in the traditional sense, but rather interconnected areas that we will explore, which sounds more like careful and intentional design to me, where every corner hides dangers or rewards. And yes, the game doesn't hide the violence. Limbs being severed, blood everywhere, that visual cruelty that makes you respect every enemy on the screen. The story continues after the events of the first game, and what makes me curious is that the original Eve will still appear in some way, so we aren't simply discarding what happened before. It's an expansion of the universe that respects the veteran player, but creates space for new characters and new conflicts. Evie seems to have a more androgynous vibe with a visual design that mixes that white suit with the brutality of melee combat. It reminds me of Yukito Kishiro's Gundam, you know? That contrast between delicacy and extreme violence. There is no confirmed release date, platforms, or price yet, but the trailer was captured on PC and Shift Up will publish the game themselves this time, which may mean more creative freedom. If you're one of those who loved Elden Ring not just for the difficulty, but for the sense of achievement, the dark aesthetic, and combat that requires attention and precision, Stellar Blade: Blood Rain needs to be on your list. If you're missing a world that mixes brutal combat with a dark atmosphere that keeps you hooked from start to finish, you need to put Onimusha Way of the Sword on your radar right now. Capcom has finally brought back this legendary franchise after almost 20 years, and what I've seen so far reminds me a lot of that sense of discovery that Elden Ring gave us, only now with a dark Japanese fantasy coat that smells of gunpowder and blood. We will set foot in Kyoto during the Edo period, but don't expect that quiet historical city. Malice has corrupted everything, turning famous streets into nightmarish scenes filled with creatures called Genma. The protagonist this time is Miyamoto Musashi himself, and Capcom modeled him after none other than Toshiro Mifune, that icon of samurai films we know and love. He carries the Oni Gauntlet, a mystical artifact that gives him the power to face these abominations, and the combat promises to be exactly what fans of hardcore action ask for. Intense, bloody, with parries that make your sword vibrate and cinematic executions that don't skimp on visual effects. If you like the precision and weight of weapons in Elden Ring, here the promise is a fencing system that captures the real impact of every strike, with blade-on-blade clashes that create absurd tactical depth. The sense of exploration also seems to have the care that we value. Each stage is wrapped in mystery, danger, and intrigue, which makes me think of that level design that rewards you for paying attention, but without holding your hand. The Issen, that classic counterattack from the series, is back along with new mechanics that further improve melee combat. It's that type of game where you will die, take a deep breath, and come back because the victory will taste like pure glory. What makes me especially excited is seeing how Capcom is respecting the roots of the series while modernizing everything. The Onimusha series has always known how to mix historical facts with Japanese folklore, and Way of the Sword seems to take this to an impressive visual level, with monsters from the underworld and an unsettling environment that sticks in your memory. We're talking about a game that already has a demo available on PlayStation 5, so you can feel for yourself if this premise really delivers what it promises. Onimusha, Way of the Sword arrives on September 25th, 2026, for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, PC via Steam, and even Nintendo Switch 2. So practically everyone will be able to play it. If you enjoyed the cruelty, the dark aesthetic, and the sense of achievement in Elden Ring, this game seems to have been tailored for you. Here's a tip. Download the demo, feel the weight of the sword, and let me know later if you also felt that thrill. The Night Wanderer is not an Elden Ring clone, far from it. But it carries that soul of fair punishment, rewarding exploration, and a lore that makes you want to scour every corner of the map. The difference is that here we trade the pure medieval setting for a brutal mix of science fiction and Nordic fantasy. And trust me, this combination hits hard. The story throws us onto the planet Midgard, a place that seems to have come out of Viking legends but hides alien technology and corrosive radiation that distorts everything around it. A scientific expedition from Earth disappeared without a trace, and our mission is to find out what happened. What impresses me is how the world feels alive and hostile, changing creatures, objects, and even people who come into contact with these mysterious forces. It's that oppressive atmosphere we love, where every new area brings a bigger mystery and a crueler danger. You control Vuko Drakainen, an elite mercenary who literally fell from the stars and is considered by some to be almost a god among men. He is not just a skilled warrior, he carries the Sifril, a biological artificial intelligence connected to his nervous system that amplifies his strength, reflexes, and resistance. This adds a tactical layer to the combat, which is dynamic but requires thought, exactly as we saw in the best moments of Elden Ring. You need to read the enemy, position yourself well, and use everything you have at your disposal to survive, because Midgard doesn't forgive those who play on autopilot. What makes me extremely excited is the exploration structure that draws from the fountain of Metroidvanias. The areas are interconnected, full of secrets, shortcuts, and powers that unlock previously inaccessible paths. The game runs on Unreal Engine 5 and uses photogrammetry to give a realistic and immersive look to this alien Scandinavian landscape. The feeling of advancing through a frozen valley, finding an ancient ruin, and being surprised by a corrupted abomination is exactly the type of experience that keeps me hooked for dozens of hours.